Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session number 4, which is energy resources, a driver or challenge for business development. My name is Sean MACKLE. I'm responsible for trade and economic policy in Brussels for the European fertilizer manufacturers industry. The manufacture of fertilizers is heavily energy intensive. A finished fertilizer, the cost of production is about 60 to 80% of the cost of production is actually natural gas. So we're an extraordinarily energy intensive industry, and we are an extraordinary capital intensive industry. We have also had extraordinary relationships with the Eastern Partnership countries, in particular Ukraine, but also more particularly with Russia, which has the largest fertilizer industry in the world, and has been extremely problematic due to its artificially low state fixed gas prices, whereby the Russian government forces Gazprom to sell locally its gas below cost. So artificial state fixed pricing has been a fundamental problem for the European fertilizer industry. However, in the course of all of this work, we have adopted an approach of cooperation with the East and also challenge with the East. We recognise that we have to live together, and we also recognise that the energy in this world does exist in the East with Russia and the Caspian, and further into Iran and Qatar with the largest gas fields in the world. We also face an American challenge. We face an American challenge with $4 gas, and we can expect a similar level in Algeria, $4, and in Russia it will be higher, no doubt, because of the more difficult terrain. But essentially, we see the supply of gas to Europe as absolutely essential if European manufacturing is to survive and prosper. In Europe, we have the prospect that the Netherlands and the United Kingdom will lose around 120 billion cubic meters of natural gas by 2030. We have to find alternative, competitive gas into the European Union if European and the wider European energy community and the wider Eastern Partnership, we have to develop a pan-European market and a market model which is able to make European industry competitive. Now that's a rather long introduction, but it is in fact the first question that will be put to all our panellists is what is the affordable and secure way of securing energy supply to pan-Europe in the coming decades? This is the absolutely essential question for this panel this afternoon. Now, having put the question, I would now like each panel member sequentially, as we go along this table, to introduce yourselves, please, and to declare your very specific interest and responsibility with the Eastern Partnership. Thank you.
Do I start? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tea Hitarishvili, and I'm Senior Manager for Caspian and Black Sea regional programs at the International Energy Agency. None of the countries in the region are, unfortunately, members to either OECD or to the IEA. But since International Energy Agency has very significant programs for non-member countries, this region is prioritized as one of the high priority regions, and we've just recently completed energy policy reviews of 11 countries in Eastern Europe, Caucasus and Central Asia. So our activities in the region is quite vast and active. Thank you.
Well, my name is Peter Balázs. I am the head of the European Commission's support group for Ukraine. So therefore, I am going to speak on the particular experiences and challenges of Ukraine, the largest eastern partner of the EU, and due to the known reasons and under known conditions, perhaps the most challenged eastern partner. I don't know if you would like that immediately I react to your question, or
I think we go along.
Okay.
My name is Rosa Lansky. I founded and operate an energy generation company in Georgia. By origin, I'm Bulgarian, and the last 9 years I've spent in Caucasus region and Turkey. And my prime focus is energy, electricity generation, and sales over the South Black Sea area.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Sony. I'm Director of Research at Nomisma Energia. Nomisma Energia is the first energy and environmental consultancy company in Italy. We provide market analysis and other services to investors and power market operators. We have been working in 3 of the 6 Eastern Partnership members for the past 3 years, providing analysis and services for different investors.
Hello, I'm Michaela Stratton. I'm Director for the Agency of Energy Efficiency of the Republic of Moldova. I'm very glad to be here, and I represent the state authorities of Moldova. And our agency is primarily engaged in knowledge, in providing the policy of renewable resources of energy. During this short period of time of 4 years, since the agency was established, I can say that on the way of introducing the European policy in this area, we had less energy dependency by 5%. Before that, we imported energy resources, 95% of energy resources from our general consumption. Today, we can declare that we have only 90% dependency on energy resources.
Moi, Stephane BUFFETAUT. Je suis le président de la section transport, énergie, infrastructure du Comité économique et social européen. La question de l'énergie est absolument essentielle pour notre économie qui vit et qui est dopée par l'énergie. Et d'ailleurs, tout le progrès économique et toute la révolution industrielle a été fondée sur la maîtrise et la transformation de l'énergie. Finalement, de l'Antiquité jusqu'à la fin du XVIIIe siècle, on utilisait les énergies naturelles, le vent, le feu et le muscle, des animaux ou des hommes, comme moyen d'énergie. C'est la découverte de
have been using the natural sources of energy since centuries. Wind energy, further, the steam engine was invented, and other systems which caused the industrial revolution. And presently, our industry is completely dependent on energy. The EU industry is dependent on it. On the one hand, states are forming associations and alliances, and then our neighbor country, Russia, has to be mentioned, which is a source of energy and which has provide energy resources for the future.
5 minutes each to answer the question. And the question again is this: having access to affordable and secure energy supplies is crucial for the competitiveness of business. How can the Eastern Partnership help secure affordable, reliable energy supply?
Thank you. Indeed, having accessible and affordable energy supplies is crucial to the competitiveness of the business. But I would like to start from the fact that it is far from being the only condition for competitiveness of the business. What we have seen in the region is that whole region has been relaxing their investment legislation and regulations. They have raised quite high up in doing business rankings. However, it has not produced the amount of foreign direct investments that countries were hoping for or desired. What is the most important, and I think it has been very strongly underlined by the Commissioner Hahn's address this morning, that it's the implementation of the regulations that are put in place. In most of the places we are talking about quite high level and large body of legal documents and packages have been passed successfully, but secondary legislation is not in place, and therefore implementation is lagging. Another quite important aspect of the competitiveness of the business is clear, stable and predictable business environment, and the liberalized environment for the businesses. What we have seen all across the region, and I would now add as well the Central Asia, everywhere we've seen, and especially in energy sector and in oil and gas sector, the private ventures have managed to deliver remarkable projects, be it oil and gas export pipelines, towards Europe or towards East to Asia, to other exploration and production operations. What it is proving is that when business is free and when business is given all tools to manifest their business ventures, it has delivered their results. What we have seen, however, it was project-by-project support. And we would very much hope and encourage governments to turn that now into a more widespread energy and the business support mechanisms, rules and regulations that will stay predictable for a long time for the investments to have their good deeds sort of demonstrated. That's probably from my side for this stage. Thank you.
Peter?
Thanks. When you asked the question, Sean, then you spoke about the economic factors behind energy policies and access to energy, which is certainly a very important factor, but not the only factor when it comes to security and conditions of energy supplies. There are also very often political and policy considerations behind. When we speak about, you refer to the example of the using of differentiated energy prices, then it's not just an economic policy, but at the same time there are also sometimes broader political considerations of industrial development, but I would add that in a WTO inconsistent manner for the domestic industry by assuring under or market prices, basically supply of energy inputs at prices which are maintained below the world market prices by government intervention. However, when it comes to the Eastern partners, unfortunately we see, and we see it for quite some time, also even more purely political motivation, and that is to use by the big neighbor, Russia, energy as a tool of political leverage in two forms. First of all, price differentiation and price discrimination. Countries get energy through the at prices which are set according to political considerations. So countries which are considered as friendly to Russia get by at lower prices, which have nothing to do with market conditions, because the monopoly supplier, exporter of energy, Gazprom, is state-owned and fully state-controlled, and the differentiated prices are straight consequences of government policies. Even more, if you want, stronger means of energy as a political tool is to having the hands on the tap. The opening or closing the supplies according to political considerations. In one or another period, most of our Eastern partners who have had some problems with Russia have experienced unexpected problems in their energy supplies, be it Georgia, be it Moldova, and very recently it is Ukraine, which has the most concerns in this respect. How the EU can help under such conditions? I would use the example, as I mentioned, of Ukraine, as the Ukraine is now in the most challenged position. First of all, the European Commission is directly involved in negotiations and it plays a kind of intermediary role between Russia and Ukraine to negotiate affordable conditions and prices for supplies of energy to Ukraine. This has been so far relatively successful because in spite of the political situation in the East, the energy supplies continued to Ukraine, and therefore Ukraine was also able to maintain its traditional role as transit country for energy, especially for gas, but also for oil towards the EU, and thereby ensuring the supply to EU industries. The second form of assistance is direct supplies of energy, especially of gas, by the so-called reverse flows, when those neighboring EU member states, which are in a position to do so, they use a part of the gas what they received either from Russia or from other sources to supply Ukraine at prices which are lower than what Ukraine would get. However, even this is at this stage looks like that it, based on at least the indication from the Russian side, that this kind of assistance is not unlimited in time, because Russia has formally declared that they will stop supplying Ukraine or using Ukraine as a transit country from 2019, and it will be instead Turkey, which they wish to use for the future as the point of distribution of gas supplies to the central and southern part of Europe. This is an issue, therefore, which is still not in force, but it shows that the security of energy supplies, both for this part of the EU, but also to Ukraine itself, will remain a challenge for the coming period.
Thank you.
I will try to answer to your question through the, I will go more micro level from the perspective of Georgia. It's just because I've spent the last 9 years there, and it's one of the countries which has realized quite significant improvement in the last 12, 13 years. It's a country where there was no electricity, 24-hour supply, etc. And then suddenly this was realized. And Georgia is interesting in one more context. It's a transit country for oil and gas from the Caspian and Central Asia. Potentially an alternative, or let's say it will allow Europe to diversify its gas and oil supplies. And I would say it has a huge potential, or enough potential, to generate electricity for the Turkish and Balkan markets. And just sharing my experience, I would mention that the question is a little bit misleading, because I'm on the other side of the industry. I'm the producer of electricity. And unfortunately, the energy resources and electricity in particular is always considered like a more like a social commodity, where governments try to interfere a lot, even though there are declarations that there will be deregulation and etc. Believe me, behind the scenes there's a lot of influence trying to manipulate the prices, trying to direct to one or other sector or to the households, if we talk about gas and electricity. And I think this is one of the reasons why in the last 10 years, even though huge reforms were done administratively, a lot of improvements were done, and the environment in Georgia has been significantly improved compared to other Southeast European even countries. I would say that there was no huge success in attracting investments in the energy sector. There were some projects, and they have started some projects, but with huge government support, which is in contradiction to what was initially the idea, to have a purely private investment participation. And energy is very important for the development of any sector, specifically the energy-intensive sectors. But I think the question mark, which now I would say the whole region is, and in particular Georgia, the question mark where we are going to. Is it going to be the regulated market, third-party access, direct customers, B2B negotiations, or it will continue to be regulated? And this, to some extent, is also considering the gas sector in Georgia, where there is only one supply of gas. And even though the promising potential, I would say that looking at the future, it is really a question mark. And this is where I see that the Eastern Partnership can further strengthen its presence and promote further deregulation and more free market and liberal policies. I do believe that this is the only future, and as soon as this will be implemented, it will be the better, because lots of investors, the sector is quite capital intensive, that's true. There is already a project which was implemented with the help of European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EIB and IFC. It's a connector to Turkey, back-to-back, 700 megawatts. And the huge surprise to that time minister was he just wrote an SMS. I congratulated him with opening the line, and he said, thank you, but there is no electricity. Which was just to say we failed to attract the investments. No one believed us that we'll put this line into connection. And there are lots of nice investors, I would say smart money, which are not looking for necessarily guarantees. When they start making due diligence, a lot of questions pop up. On the surface, the presentations and everything is promising. But when you start making due diligence, you come up with non-written rules or some promises which, well, we are all human. We change our positions or something, and then you're in a position of nowhere with a huge capital invested into something which might turn out to be a failure. And why I decided to share this experience is that Georgia has made a significant improvement. It has a very interesting and bright future. It might turn out to be a hub of electricity, gas, and oil transmission, but it needs a lot of, let's say, I would call it help, in order to move forward and improvement its policies, and to embrace the liberal model, because I do not believe that regulation is the solution on the long run. The smart money will run away anyway. When you have lots of governmental decisions there and non-clear procedures of tendering, then you end up with no investors which are looking more on the business and not just to guarantee their IRRs.
I know it's quite hard when we talk about energy not to talk about politics. The first idea that comes in mind is always related to the use that governments make of the energy vector. But I'll try to keep politics out of the frame. Energy is a complex issue. We cannot look at energy just on the security side. We've made advancement on that side. We can look at it as a triangle. There is, on one angle, there is security. On the other one, there is affordability. And on the other one is sustainability. You probably have heard about the Tesla announcement of a couple of weeks ago. It was very sensational. Every house now would be able to have batteries to store electricity and to be let's say, active, not just passive in the consumption of energy. That is, I don't want to talk about a revolution, but this is a huge change, and this is going to affect the energy market in the next futures. So when we talk about energy, we cannot just refer to what the markets used to be. I don't know if in 10 years' time we will still talk about, you know, pipelines and stuff like that, and the dependency on this or that source. What is true is that energy is a major driver for economic growth. If you look at the statistics, every country, the economic growth is based on energy demand. And this is a fact, and the fact that energy costs in different ways in different countries is a sort of starting point to assess the competitiveness of an industry or a country. We know, like, for example, Europe is probably one of the worst examples for energy affordability. We pay like 3 times the price of gas compared to the US. We paid like double the price of electricity. We've done several analyses at sectoral levels, and we know that this overprice has impact on the final price of goods from a lower 5% to up to a 30% for some sectors. And when you think about the globalized world, the globalized market, if your goods start with a 30% higher price, it's quite hard to compete. So you can see that affordability is directly connected with security, but security is not just related to Russia. If you think about, for example, France or Belgium, you do not think about that as unsecure countries or that they do not have their own resources. I mean, they both heavily relied on nuclear power plants, so electricity is pretty cheap. But look at the past months in France and Belgium, they both recorded unplanned maintenance works, and the price of electricity doubled, tripled, and it was even 4 times higher in some hours. That is a fact, and that, you know, it's quite strange to look at that because it's usually pretty cheap to buy electricity in France. So the main question is more like what is the price that we are willing to pay to have energy at all time? And that is connected with investments. That is connected with what was mentioned before, the regulatory framework, the long-term strategies that politicians, governments put in place. Investors need a long-term credible signal to put money on their investments, and that will favor 3 different goals: more integration, more diversification, and energy which is more affordable and more secure.
Speaking on behalf of the country which is a participant of the Eastern Partnership, I can say that apart from the problems, geopolitical problems that have been widely discussed today, there is another heritage we got since the Soviet times, and specifically big energy consumption of production and of industry. Correspondingly, we need, apart from geopolitical solutions and legislation, we have to do everything to attract investments, long-term investments specifically, in order to bring new technologies and make them more affordable. Apart from technologies, so the second stage or parallel stage that we can do together, it's important to make more investments and to make more attention to the human resource as a mentality of a large part of people of the post-Soviet area. And from this point of view, it is necessary to reform, both change the training programs and improve them, and whenever possible also to to do regarding our relations and discussions in Eastern Partnership, to bring this, to make them on the permanent basis or permanent platform. We need more frequent meetings. So this was emphasized today several times, and I cannot but agree to this.
La question était donc de savoir comment le partenariat.
With regard to the issue of whether the Eastern Partnership can offer solutions in this area, I have heard that the energy market was discussed as a liberalized market. However, energy will always be part of the state policy. It has been the practice starting from Roosevelt's government, who at the end of World War II met the leaders of Saudi Arabia, and they entered a complex negotiation to provide his country with energy resources. Energy has always been an element of the national policy, not only the problem and element of the economy, but also the element of our political reality. Therefore, we must see this partnership as a bridge in our relationship with Russia as well. Not only as a bridge in our mutual relationship, but also as a bridge for solving various conflicts with Russia.
Mr. Jens Severgadas from the Energy Policy Committee of the EU Committee of Regions would like to make an intervention, please.
Thank you very much. Just a very brief comment. We would like to supplement the debate here with a non-state perspective which might inspire our partners in the Eastern Partnership countries. The Committee of Regions has been looking at small and medium-sized business at local and regional level, how energy policy challenges are reflected there. What we find out is that small-scale renewable energy projects, which are implemented locally, not always necessarily increase the bills of consumers, quite the other way around. The best of best practices prove that this not only increases your security of supply, it also alleviates the bills which are sent to the consumers. Another question is if we should maintain in Europe this leadership, so to say, in renewable energy technologies, which is not always easy given the global competition. The Committee of Regions has found it necessary to increase the level of ambition of the European Union, because like that it can serve as inspiration also to the neighboring countries. To do so, we need ambitious objectives at the national and EU level, but these objectives need to be matched also with other signals, with some public expenditure in spite of austerity, which would give guidance to the market, which would not only say you can maintain your level of investment without abandoning your effort, but it will pay back, because it's the interest of the public, it's the interest of the states, it's the interest of everybody. These signals, in spite of austerity or any financial problems, we have been discussing a lot. Our members have been looking into new financial instruments for this purpose. We have been in very close dialogue with the European Investment Bank about this. So probably there is a huge potential for business in green energy, not only renewable energy, also energy efficiency. I really wanted to use this opportunity to highlight green energy along conventional and fossil energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariana Rufa, and I represent the European Business Association of the Republic of Moldova. This is an association which actually unifies one of the biggest investors in Moldova, European companies, but also big Moldovan companies. Within the association, we have an energy committee, and I just wanted to confirm that in the context of this FTA implementation, energy sector really became very important. As so far, we had some requests from foreign investors to come and to invest in Moldova in solar energy or hydro centrals or, wind energy and so on, biomass. Unfortunately, at the moment, it proved in concrete cases that there are many other problems besides those that were mentioned here, and with all my respects to Energy Efficiency Fund, indeed they've done a great job. There are a lot of things that need to be done by the government on one side and on the other side, to not have them on paper but in practice. And we are specifically talking about depolitization of the state institutions when it comes to tariff issuing, to have not just clear procedures on paper but to have them working in practice, so as any foreign investor who comes and apply for a tariff to have a very clear indication about the timing of issuing of this tariff, as well as of the procedure which will be clearly exposed with a view to these tariffs. It's also about the standards, which are very much obsolete at the moment, and we are speaking about energy standards in the solar energy, in wind energy, the types of resources that did not exist in these countries before, and now they become a priority in the context of energy safety and energy security. So I think that, considering that so much that today's discussions have been related to DCFTA, one of the priority when it comes to energy security is the implementation of the agreement, of the association agreement actually, in practical terms, by creating concrete conditions which are not just the legal framework, but some concrete signs from the country that would attract investors. And it's not just the law, for example, for promoting energy resources, but as I said, standards that would be clearly exposed. It's also about the secondary legislation. It's also about transparent tendering procedures that would be clear and unable to be interpreted. And so these are the key measures that would be that are necessary to attract foreign investors in the exceeding countries or DCFTA countries.
Thank you. Could I just at this stage make a very clear observation that the role of the state, be it in the Eastern Partnership countries or indeed even in the European Union, is a very profound issue. And you will find that there are cultural differences within the European Union as to the regulation of energy prices. So my members, for example, in Poland and Romania, were actually supporting regulated prices. But this is the point I want to make. In the European Union, if all your ministers come to the Council, the European Union Council or the Eastern Partnership Council, and they agree that we must have a market model, yeah, and we must have these standards, and we must have these relationships across borders, and we must have security of supply across borders, then I can assure you the European Commission and the European courts will ensure that it is done. And after the problem now with Russia, where we have an energy union which is a new political boost to the formation of a true market model in Europe and in wider Europe, I assure you the Commission and the courts will make it work. They will make it work. And investors need certainty and predictability. My members are now forced to accept this market model is coming. It will probably come by about 2017. So I would like to again invite the panellists now to comment on what I've just said. I freely admit again that my industry is one of the biggest industry consumers of energy. We are generally convinced, not totally right across Europe, but generally convinced if you have a market working off hubs, as we do particularly in Northwest Europe and increasingly in Germany, You have the market making it work, not Gazprom, not Statoil, and not governments. So I invite the panel to comment.
Can I just make a brief comment on this? Maybe because to some extent I'm more in favor of what you have just mentioned. I believe that to some extent, of course, it never exists 100% to the free market. But I can give you one example from my experience. When I took over the company, it was actually the energy distribution company in Georgia, apart from the city of Tbilisi. The losses were 30%. Within 2.5 years, without huge investments, even one would say there were just usual investments for maintenance, we achieved to drop up to 12% losses. This saved about 250 to 300 gigawatt hours, which were just wasted. Now, on paper, the decision was we have to construct immediately new hydro or something else, which would cost $200–300 million. This immediately released a resource which was utilized by the industry, because in Georgia for the past 10 years the consumption has been increasing with 4, 5 to 6, 7%. So I would say that also efficiency, what was mentioned, plays a huge role in the partnership countries, because still there is an absolute technology used in factories, in water distribution. The pumps are consuming 4 or 5 times more than the current available technology, and you can purchase it. It's not a secret. So I think this is not at all under consideration, because everyone realizes that the government will keep the tariffs low, and they're subsidized. There is a huge state hydro which is subsidized by budget, rehabilitated by budget. The price is 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour, and everyone is happy. Investors are coming, they don't invest, they just take out the money from, let's say, the country. I don't want to blame anyone, but you have huge inefficiency in the pipe. So some resources are transferred to other sectors and vice versa. So I believe that to some extent some free market will regulate the distribution of wealth, and it will give the right price at that moment of the resource, which is very important. And of course, regarding households, etc., which is the most political issue, a government can always implement some instruments in order to maintain the social, let's say, fairness at that very moment of the development of the economy. Thank you.
Yeah, if I...
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you allow me, I would just bridge the latest statement with your question. Yes, indeed, at the IEA we call energy efficiency a hidden fuel. And very quick example, our analysis show that if countries in Eastern Europe, Caucasus and Central Asia were to use energy as efficiently as OECD countries, and as we all know, we are not the best and the most efficient energy users, energy demand will be cut half. So we are talking about huge possibilities and opportunities missed and unused. And that is, again, part of the energy security we were talking earlier on. Now, we are also talking about very severely aged infrastructure, some working beyond their designed life. And district heating would be one of the main examples, but Moldova and Ukraine in this particular case. We are talking about energy supply side energy efficiency measures which are implemented by the governments, and Azerbaijan here is the key. Energy intensity in Azerbaijan has dramatically decreased due to the fact that Azerbaijan replaced oil with natural gas for electricity generation, and that produced the large, but that was only on supply side, and demand side measures are out of government's coverage for the policies and measures. And here the most important things are probably information campaign, availability of affordable loans, and the pricing of energy, as it was mentioned here, is absolutely paramount. every country we are talking about here subsidizes at least one form of energy. And in this environment, it will be very difficult for any new renewable or energy efficiency measures or technologies to be penetrating the market. And then to go back to your original question about the government versus the private sector, what we see here, we see a very hybrid approach. We have Belarus and Azerbaijan on one hand, where we have unbroken state-governed sectors, and then we have Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, and Armenia, which have started with numerous waves of privatization, setting up new markets, regulators, and what we've seen from about 2006 to 2008, all of them have taken the regulatory functions back in the government hands, and regulators basically became notary officers notarizing the tariffs, which is agreed between the government and the private company. So all in all, as an IEA representative, we would not advocate for regulated or unregulated markets, but consistency, predictability, and removal of this hybrid system is paramount in this region, I believe. Thank you.
Peter, would you like to comment on the European model?
Yeah, I think that when you speak about the model of regulated prices, I think that we have to be clear that when we speak about regulated prices, these mean maximized prices or subsidized prices. The maximized prices, I mean that the regulation doesn't go further than it says that they're based on a cost plus profit, so that how much more or higher the energy prices can be than for instance, the import prices or the production prices. In that case, probably there is not much of a distortion. However, when we speak about subsidized prices, and it is also clear that in the Eastern partner countries, but I would add also in a number of EU member states, the energy prices, or at least some energy prices, are subsidized. Then, of course, there are some broader issues arise. The next level of question, whether if we're speaking about subsidized prices, this is subsidized for all users, be it consumers and industry, or only one or another group of them. We strongly advise against, as for the reasons you mentioned, Sean, in your intervention, to use, for instance, energy prices as an industrial subsidy tool, and to use basically government revenue to help in this way the industry by providing energy to the producers, users, industrial users below cost. When it comes to the consumers, it is clear that very often, especially when as many of these countries have rather low incomes on average, low GDP figures and low incomes, and energy prices are used as a tool of social policy, then it's very clear that the way we propose to use this kind of tool only is in a targeted manner. Keeping energy prices in general low for the sake of the consumer, it's not social policy in reality, but this is a huge outflow of government resources, because consumers, irrespective of their economic situation, get energy at under market prices, subsidized prices, and based on the experiences, especially in Ukraine, it's also a huge source of corruption. The subsidized prices received by the or applied for the private consumers are very often used for reselling the energy to industrial users, and this is one of the major reform steps that is very strongly advised, not by just the EU, but other supporters of Ukraine. So the bottom line, if the governments wish to help consumers, then they should do it in a targeted manner only to the low-income consumers by direct, for instance, compensation of the energy bills, but certainly not through by keeping energy prices artificially low.
Thank you. Would any panel member like to make a last quick contribution?
Yeah, I want to be a little bit provocative. If there is something that history teaches us is that governments are pretty bad at picking the winning technologies. So they need to create the conditions for a market to develop and to exploit it fully. And renewables, the comment on renewables is absolutely true. I mean, it's consistent with the reality, but to fully exploit the potential of renewables, you need to have integrated markets, because it doesn't make sense to install solar PV everywhere, even if there is no sun. So,
yes. Any more comments? We're coming to.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Please.
По моему мнению, если
In my opinion, a couple of minutes, we should not adopt laws or take laws without accounting physical opportunities of energy systems of different countries. Based on this point of view, I think that it is important to look at the energy efficiency, and this should be the priority, taking into account that such countries as post-Soviet Union area countries, they have the consumption which exceeds that of the European Union by 2 or 3 times on average. I think this is a possibility to make the economies less energy consuming. Out of that, I say that we should not use, I don't say that we do not have to use renewable sources of energy, but they should be moderately introduced or gradually introduced, taking into account all possible consequences, which could cost much more for the consumers. Thank you.
From the panel. So, if I may, as we're coming to near the end of the session, I will try and sum up the panelists' views and also the views from the audience. I think it's evident that the role of the state and the role of geostrategic realities, which is the relationship with Russia and the relationship with the European Union, has to be managed. The way that is managed may be very difficult, but the physical realities have to be recognized. They have to be recognized. We will have to find a way of developing a relationship with Russia, hopefully not on a command and control basis, but on a market model basis. Now, for this Commission, the next 5 years, Mrs. Mogherini has said that's going to be very difficult to do. But it will come eventually. And it seems that the second thing very much is the market and private enterprise can make the better decisions. However, for the big infrastructural projects, which we didn't actually discuss in great detail, but for big infrastructure, again, the role of the state will be there and it will have a role. The third factor, which has come from the panel, energy efficiency is the hidden fuel. It is imperative that industries and governments actually push this energy efficiency. My industry has survived and prospered because it's the most energy efficient fertilizer industry in the world by a long way. But they are catching up. Not Russia and Ukraine, by the way, but the Americans are catching up, and the new plants in North Africa are coming in at Europe's best available technology limits. Energy efficiency is a hidden gem that has to be worked. Finally, there will be some soft features that need to be developed. In particular, I do think that exchange of information, technical assistance, collaboration is vital to move on. Do not get isolated into one way of thinking or one set of relationships. The whole essence of the new energy union is diversification of sources, diversification of suppliers, and that is the coming European reality across all of Europe. Diversification is the most significant new push in Brussels, and that is what I would suggest are the thematics to carry.
One thing.
Yes, please do.
you would allow me, one thing we have not touched upon, which is very important, I believe. In all the countries we are discussing, there are quite a large number of research and academic institutions. However, support for last 20, 25 years to these institutions were next to none. It is very important for renewables, for energy efficiency, research, development and deployment to be pushed beyond to what it is today. We do not have any homegrown technologies in the region, and I believe both government and external support to research development and to wider support to technology deployment, not just technology transfer, but much wider technology deployment is very important for the region. And I do believe the CFTA would pave the way to quite a lot of directions in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So finally, I would like to thank all the panellists for their contributions. I'd like to thank you, the audience, as well. This went remarkably quickly. It's always the problem with energy. It's multifaceted, multi-issue, very difficult to handle in 1 hour. But I hope there was some thematics that came from that. So thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.